Nobody gets beyond a petroleum economy, now while there's petroleum there. The hike in petroleum prices all over the world has been a consistent yet concerning problem that has caused catastrophe all over the world. With all these problems on one hand, Saudi Arabia has officially decided to add fuel to the fire when they released this news. Yes, you heard us right. With the new Saudi oil prices hiking like never before, how is the US going to meet its daily fuel consumption? How are they planning to combat this surge? And most importantly, will the US join hands with two of their biggest geopolitical enemies, China and Russia? Watch the video to the very end to find out. In a recent conference that took place, Goldman Sachs and Saudi Arabia warned the world of a major oil price surge that was about to take place. This, along with the efforts of Western sanctions on Russian petroleum production and the lack of investment in the industry, has always been a hot topic of discussion. Saudi Arabia's energy minister, Prince Abdulaziz bin Salman, raised the concern in the conference where he asked, all of those so-called sanctions, embargoes, lack of investments, they will convolute into one thing and one thing only, a lack of energy supplies of all kinds when they are most needed. The Brent crude for the year 2023 has been quite steady at around $75 to $80 a barrel. However, Goldman Sachs, along with other firms, believe that this won't be the case for long, with a forecast that is predicting that Brent will max out at $100 a barrel by the month of May. The news doesn't come across as a happy one for the Saudi Arabian government. This, along with the decrease in spare production capacity, would lead to a massive increase in energy prices all over the world. These heightened prices would become even harder to cope with due to the EU's latest decision of cutting Russia off as a producer of petroleum for the European Union nations. For some reference, pre-Russia-Ukraine war, the EU acquired 29% of its coal, 43% of its natural gas, and 29% of its oil from Russia. That's a significant amount of energy supplies that will remain unavailable to the EU countries until the ban is lifted. So, what will they do to meet their energy needs till then? Well, if the EU is planning for lesser dependency on Russia in the long run, it seems idealistic for them to start construction structures and channels to bridge the demand and supply gap that persists. It was speculated that it would likely take anywhere between 3 to 5 years to construct the infrastructure that's necessary to bring in that much energy from other sources. Let's remind you that this is just the bare minimum and technical advancements and efficiency are not factored into this. But even if we assume that the EU got their infrastructure up and running in this shorter period of time, who's going to invest in this model? In the past, the EU has evaluated investing in oil production in several African nations, including Namibia, South Africa, Uganda, Kenya, Mozambique, and Tanzania. These were just plans and weren't executed by the Commission. Had the EU invested in these countries earlier, the EU would have enough energy requirements met that the elimination of Russia as their energy supplier would barely make a difference. Alas, that wasn't the case. In fact, these investments would have been made at least a year prior to actually being fruitful and completely replace the Russian oil and gas in a timely manner. All the reasons and facts, point back to the same matter, that an increase in global energy prices due to a deficit in supply will negatively affect the whole world, but the consequences that the EU will face would be immaculate. And how is the West preparing itself to cope up with this energy famine? In a recent meeting, the effects of the Western sanctions and how it affected the production of petroleum were discussed in depth. The analysis was quoted as saying, right now, we're still balanced to a surplus because China has still yet to fully rebound. Are we going to run out of spare production capacity? Potentially by 2024, you start to have a serious problem. Analysis Curry also raised a serious question about the concerns on a major increase in global petroleum prices due to the combination of OPEC plus countries like Russia and Saudi Arabia cutting their production and China at the same time rebounding from its dip in natural gas demand caused by COVID. However, he believes that the major problem that these petroleum producing countries will have to face in the foreseen future would be to having to tap their spare production capacity as global demand rapidly increases. The unanticipated increase in the price of Saudi Arabian crude oil for the March loading cargoes show positive signs for the Chinese fuel market. With the Chinese economy reviving on one hand, the possibility of China importing crude oil in the current months are very high. But the question goes back to whether Saudi Aramco and the broader oil trading community will be more interested in purchasing relatively expensive Saudi oil, or whether Chinese refiners will successfully source cheaper alternatives. Aramco, the state-controlled oil producer, raised the official selling price of its flagship Arab Light blend for Asian customers for March cargoes by 20 cents a barrel. The increase withstood refiners' anticipations for a 30 cent a barrel cut to the OSP for March loading cargoes, amid signs that actual physical demand in China. If things go as planned, China's physical demands would accelerate from March. It may prove Aramco made the correct call in raising its OSP, but the consequence of this would be that Saudi oil would become less sought after by refiners, not only in China, but also in the rest of Asia, which is a huge loss for the Saudis. If China's physical demand does speed up from March, it is proof that Aramco made the correct call in raising its OSP. This would further allow Saudi Arabia to restrict exports if it aims to boost global prices. This also simultaneously lets refiners to take smaller volumes if they see demand for refined products slipping, or if refining margins make processing crude oil uneconomic. And China has planned this scenario quite well. Did you know that China has already been buying increasing volumes from Russia? So much so that Russia has displaced Saudi Arabia as China's top supplier in several recent months. This is mainly due to the discounted prices at which Russian crude is now being offered to European and other buyers such as Japan in imports as part of efforts to punish Moscow for its February 24th invasion of Ukraine. China imported 2.03 million barrels per day from Russia in January, up from 1.52 million barrels per day in December. This made Russia the top supplier to China, overtaking Saudi Arabia with January imports of 1.77 million BPD from the kingdom. It was also recently realized that Russia will cut down its oil production by 500,000 barrels per day. This would equate to almost a 5% cut in its total output by March. Ever since the 5th of December, Russian oil was priced at above $60 per barrel as part of the Western sanctions on Moscow over its actions in Ukraine. The news of the price cap came in simultaneously with the EU also declaring a ban on the purchases of Russian oil products and setting the price caps from the 5th of December. As of today, we're fully selling the entire volume of oil produced. However, as stated earlier, we will not sell oil to those directly or indirectly adhere to the principles of the price cap, said Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak in a statement. But it wasn't just the EU that were planning a strike on the Russian-produced petroleum. The G7, the European Union, and Australia combined agreed to ban the use of Western-supplied maritime insurance, finance, and brokering for seaborne Russian oil priced above $60 per barrel as part of Western sanctions on Moscow over its actions in Ukraine. The relationships between the EU and Russia only strained further when the EU further slapped a ban on purchases of Russian oil products and set price caps from the 5th of February. As of today, we're fully selling the entire volume of oil produced. However, as stated earlier, we will not sell oil to those who directly or indirectly adhere to the principles of the price cap, Novak said in a statement. In this regard, Russia will voluntarily reduce production by 500,000 barrels per day in March. This will contribute to the restoration of market relations. The forces of demand and supply brought into the world an uneven balance, which led to the spike of prices of the Brent International benchmark crude, which rose on the news of the output cuts from Russia and the world's second largest oil exporter after Saudi Arabia, increasing by more than 2% on the day to $86.36 per barrel. Russia believes that the price cap mechanism in the sale of Russian oil and oil products is an interference in market relations and a continuation of the destructive energy policy of the countries of the collective West, Novak said. Russian oil has been continually performing well and defying major predictions which forecasted a certain dip in its number due to the Western sanctions over Ukraine. Ironically, all those statistics stand to have failed as the Russian oil market has and rose by 2% last year to 535 million tons, which equated to over 10.7 million barrels per day. A major reason for this increase is the captivity of the Asian market by the Russian oil market, especially the contribution of India and China. Nonetheless, Russia is still going through hard times financially due to all the sanctions and is trying hard to keep up production of oil, a key source of revenue for the state budget. What do you think would be the future of this price game between Saudi, China, and Russia? Let us know in the comments down below.